Welcome to the Harnessing Your Divine Feminine show, hosted by Andrea Bagby. We believe that when you give a woman an opportunity, you give her the world. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to our videos.
This is Harnessing Your Divine Feminine, a TV show where we give women opportunities. And today I'm so happy to introduce Daniela Simina, and she is an author of The Fairy Path and several other books, and she's the fairy nature realm expert. And she is going to tell us all about her experience with the nature, spirits, fairies, fays, elves, her books, and her journey on this spiritual path. Welcome, Daniela.
Thank you so much for having me. It is a pleasure to be here. It is an honor to be here on this platform, and I cannot wait to share things that I treasure the most, things that I grew up with, things that are part of my spiritual path. So yeah, can't wait to talk about it.
Okay, so first of all, we have, and I was so excited when you walked in. When you walked in and you were like, "Hello, I'm Daniela," and I was like, "She is going to be on my show." So you gifted me with this book, The Fairy Path, and you signed it, so I'm very excited about that. I love fairies. I love fairies. I've seen fairies before.
Good.
So tell us a little bit about your background and how you decided. You channeled the book, obviously. It was a psychic download. Yes. Okay. So what was your journey with that?
So basically, you let me speak for the whole hour, right?
Sure.
Good. My relationship with fairies began a long time ago. When I was a child, I grew up in Romania, and my grandmother was a fairy seer and a medicine woman. Now, the times when I grew up were particularly challenging because we had the dictatorship rising to power and taking more and more control over people's life and,
wow.
and what you were allowed to believe. Some people level of controlling beliefs and what you weren't. So everything esoteric, everything spiritual, was not really something that you'd want to talk about openly because it could land the speaker and the family into trouble. Therefore, my grandmother, my aunt, my grandmother's friends were all like practicing old folk style medicine. They were trying to somehow keep the curious and nosy kid out of the way. So the curious and nosy kid, that was me, I know, comes as a surprise. Mm-hmm. The nosy kid would not go and talk about what was going on. So I grew up with this in between exposure and secrecy, things being sheltered, kept away from me. However, I started to have experiences with beings and phenomena that I could not explain. And the only person who could shed light on them was, of course, my grandmother. So in having to explain those things to me and help me understand what was going on around me, she had to teach me, and she had to teach me things in first place to protect myself. And here, sorry to burst the bubble, fairies are not all goodly inclined toward human beings in general. Some of them, I'm not going to say they're ill-meaning. They have their own agendas. Talking about fairies as benevolent or malevolent is an oversimplification. Think of sharks. Sharks are neither benevolent nor malevolent. They need to feed. And when there is something in their field that looks like food, they're going to go get it. Now, that person is a human. Sharks don't have personal antipathies or resentments toward humans. They just go and eat whatever is available. So in many cases, in many situations, encounters with fairies end up, let's say, not very well for a human part, not because the fairies are necessarily ill-meaning, but there was maybe some breach in etiquette, there was maybe some trespassing, encroaching of boundaries. we also come from a culture and from a background that sees the human being as like the pinnacle of everything, and we're like the center of everything. So it's a very homocentric view, which basically, according to the view, people are entitled to do whatever they please with the environment, whatever they please with everything around, resources. Therefore, they're also entitled to bust into fairy places and knock, knock, hey fairy, I'm here, I want to see you. And I would like to invite pondering a little bit. If you're in the privacy of your own home and somebody just bursts into your house without even knocking, hey, I'm here, I want to see you, how would that feel? So there is a reason why sometimes people getting into fairy places are not necessarily well received. What I speak is based in folklore, what I speak about is based in folklore, is based in my own personal experience. And sometimes, I don't want to say it contradicts, but it doesn't always 100% agree with very modern takes on fairy that pertain mostly to fantasy books, that pertain mostly to children's books, that are basically rooted in the Victorian era, when fairies have been on purpose infantilized and defamed and presented all very cute and very childish. Fairies are cute. Different meanings, different standards for cuteness. But they're certainly not all of them, the diminutive winged nature spirits that modern culture trains us into thinking they are. I will not say, not claim, oh, there are nowhere such things as cute fairies, because that's false. Fairies, if we look across bodies of folklore, and most importantly, encounters with fairy beings that took place within the past century and within our century, the 21st century, we see fairies coming in like all sizes and literally under all kind of appearances. So the experience that we have with them very largely, and the way they present themselves very largely. So that's kind of my fairy 101, so to speak.
So some of them are like 8 feet tall. Mm-hmm. That's amazing. Yes.
I have personal auditions and personal encounters with fairies, and actually this is what one of the things that I'm talking in this book. I'm going to circle a little bit, but I promise I'm back to the point. Fairy, okay. As 8 foot tall beings. The book is autobiographic and describes my own uncertainties and searches for an answer or for answers since I was a kid, and I was trying to reconciliate spiritual and materialistic and science and occult. And I was trying to find my place in a world where I felt I have to really find my place, because it wasn't like, oh, I naturally belong here. And one of the first things that I saw, and this is described in the book, I spied on my grandmother when she was doing her work as Fairy Seer. And what I saw were like 7, 8 foot tall beings around her. There were several of them, and it was like late at night and spying behind the curtains. Yeah. Second floor at my window, looking what is she doing in the backyard, farther away. And here are this very tall, slender, semi-transparent silhouettes, glowing, shining, and really tall. Now, there is a question of fairies having different degrees of corporality, because they can be experienced to any degree of corporality. If you look into the old lore, and even not so old lore, if you look into accounts, there are people who have encounters with other people that something gives them away that they're not really humans, but largely speaking, they look actually very human in their appearance, and all of a sudden they either disappear or they do something that gives them away that you're actually not interacting with a human. So this is one instance when fairies can take corporeal appearance, materialize basically. There are many encounters when they're perceived, as I said, the way I saw them around my grandmother, like more refined, more ethereal, less material, none as less powerful beings. There are ways of interacting with fairies. A lot of people describe that they don't see them, but they can feel and they know they're fairies because they choose to communicate through dreams, during meditation, different degrees of trance, light trance, deeper states of trance. So they choose to communicate and impart oftentimes wisdom, advice. If you look back into the history, fairy familiars who show up and teach a person how to work with plants and different forms of healing or bestow different kind of knowledge. There is usually an agreement, a pact, if you will, about secrecy, how much one can disclose. There were different explanations about why agreement with fairies have to be kept secret. I believe that knowing human nature and what we just mentioned, sometimes entitlement. I'm not claiming that everyone is entitled, but
humans are.
But sometimes
yes.
they are. If somebody feels entitled and I hear that, oh, my friend, they went to this place and the fairy gave them such and such, I might be tempted to run there and dig out the place until a fairy shows up so I can ask also to receive such and such, because hey, I'm entitled. It doesn't matter that my friend has been, for whatever reason, called and given something. I just want it. So to avoid this, I believe that there is a request, a demand for people who have certain kinds of experience to kind of keep quiet and not brag about it. There are many stories, both in Romania and Irish lore, where when somebody receives a gift from a fairy, the gift will vanish, will go away, or if it's a quality, it will diminish, it will vanish once they break the vow of secrecy. Which probably leads to the other question, why on earth am I writing about it in books and talking in front of the camera? Because there are things that I was actually invited to say. I was asked by my fairy partners, my fairy guides, I was invited to share, because there is a lot of misinformation and somebody needs to come with the information to create a balance in between different views on fairies. I'm of course not the only person who has experiences and who have very interesting things to share on fairies. I have friends who are authors, who are teachers, and we are on the same campaign, I would say, to re-enchant the world and, fairy propaganda department, I guess.
Well, I think education and just opening people's minds to this is not fake. This is real. Like, fairies are part of the spirit realm.
Absolutely.
And, I think especially humans, we treat a box in spirit realm into like angels and ghosts and, only that, but there's so many, and it's just the more you know you, the more you don't know. How long did it take you to write the book? Did you just wake up and like decide, like start typing?
So I have to give you a little bit of context here. First, this is the second book. I wrote basically 3 books in 2 years. the first book, which we don't have it with us, but it is Where Fairies Meet, parallels between Irish and Romanian fairy traditions. And it speaks about parallels between traditions surrounding fairies and these two cultures that are literally in opposition, geographical opposition, east-west across Europe. And it's very interesting to see how many similarities are. What are the differences, and how one body of material and lore can beautifully complement the other. This comparative study was also written with the intent not to really come with a, really white brush and level out differences and say, hey, these are all fairies, it's the same kind of beings, just known by different names, because that's not the case. The comparative study was written with the intention to highlight also Romanian traditions surrounding fairies, which are far less known than other bodies of lore. You say Romania, you think Dracula. There's more to that body of lore than Dracula.
Very rich, yes.
And even Dracula is not painted so much, not described with so much accuracy, at least not in Hollywood productions for most part.
No, I mean, those of us who study spirituality, we're like, was he really just misunderstood? But Romanian culture is very rich. It's very rich in education, it's very rich in culture and spirituality, and we do need to share that across the United States more.
So I had this experience when some of the fairy beings, one in particular that had a special connection with my grandmother, so she showed up and she asked me to write actually this study. And my first reaction was like, hey, yeah, right, and who's gonna actually read it? And she said, you do your part and we'll do ours. And I'm like, okay. So I had the material. I was involved with Irish spirituality and Irish lore and folklore and history for a few years at that point. So I knew enough to venture and start retelling those stories and present them side by side with material and stories that I basically grew up with. So the research took a while, but the book was written in probably less than 6 months. So 4 months and a half, 5, something like that. So it was like from draft to final manuscript ready to be submitted to the editor. So submitted my draft to Moon Books and was approved right away. And then there was the snowball. So shortly after, I was prompted is probably mild. I was literally kicked in the shins to want to write the next book. And this one, it is actually dedicated to my grandma. So that's the dedication on the first page to grandma.
What would we do without grandma?
So that's for her. And it was now bringing the under the light, into the spotlight, the tradition of it's a mix of fairy seership and what was done like folk medicine. It's not like here I am the ambassador speaking for every fairy witch and for every medicine woman in Romania, because that would be false. These traditions are very regional. So it's not only one part of the country to the other part of the country, is like smaller communities. Each of them are pockets where these things are transmitted in oral forms. Again, there's a fair amount of secrecy still surrounding them. There is sometimes transmission occurring from one generation down to the next. So that's that. So they're like probably I talk about things that people 400 miles farther up north in the country haven't really heard of. Right. Or they're like vaguely resembling to some things that they do, but it's never the exact same thing. So the point was to the point was to highlight how is it to live and grow up with such traditions. And this first-hand experience and first-hand encounter with fairy beings, because at some point in the book I get into detailing with encountering an entity that being that my grandmother recognized as fairy, but she said this is not one of the fairy beings that I'm actually working with.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't really know what kind of fairy is she. So her first step was to create protection. So to teach me how to stay, tell me more, so I could protect myself and don't do anything with potential really bad consequences. So yeah, that was like, I believe, Fairy 101.
So when you're seeing a fairy, people are listening and they're like, I'm not crazy. I'm not going to see a fairy. You're seeing it in your mind's eye. Are you seeing it like a vague shadow? Like what? How do we know we've seen fairies? What would we be looking for?
Short answer,
mm-hmm.
Everything you just said.
Right. When I saw it, it was like split second.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it could be like a split second appearance. You could swear that it was a person right there
mm-hmm.
next to me, and then you turn and it's no one.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a big chance that can be a fairy. There are situations where you just see things in the peripheral vision in the corner of your eye, and you turn and it just barely disappears. It could be a fairy, and I'll go back to this. It could be, because it could be not. And how do we tell the difference? Or, as I said, in my case, there was this child,
mm-hmm.
girl like myself, sitting on the bench in our backyard, and I was surprised. So I'm passing the bench. Initially, there was nobody there, but then I hear a voice saying hi, and I turn my head, and there's somebody sitting there.
Mm-hmm.
And I ran all kind of possible scenarios. Was she ducking under that picnic table? We had a picnic table there. Was she hiding beneath the bench? And it's impossible, because I would have seen her coming from my house and getting toward our backyard. It actually opened up in the woods. So definitely there was nobody there. And then she says briefly, "Do you want to play?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure, let's play." No other, so the thoughts came in after the fact. And then she begins to run in the woods, and I'm, "Yeah, sure, let's chase." And I followed, and I was a really good runner, but I could not close the gap in between the two of us, no matter how hard I tried. And then I realized that we're going really far into the woods, farther than I was comfortable, and it was sunset, so evening was coming, and I really didn't feel comfortable being by myself in the woods at night. So I'm shouting, "Hey, slow down!" And the girl doesn't slow down. Instead, it turns, kind of throws over the shoulder, "Never be afraid when you're with me." And at that point, I felt shivers, fear into my bones.
Wow.
And I just stopped in my track. The girl vanished. There was absolute silence, not one leaf, nothing. Everything was like still, like I was in an artificial forest, like a
mm-hmm.
stage decor kind of thing. And I knew, because I was familiar with the woods, so this was my primary playground. It was our backyard, basically extended into this patch of woods. So I turned around and oriented myself. I knew exactly that our house was straight in the east.
Mm-hmm.
So seeing the last rays of the setting sun, and I kind of knew where I came from, and start running back as quickly as I could. And I went to my grandmother, and I'm telling her everything. And she's like, from everything you said, it's a fairy. I'll go and do my own inquiries and confirm. But this is not one of the fairy beings that I am in partnership with. So this is not. So to answer the question, I believe you can encounter a fairy in any form. The most common would be probably in dream form or in meditation, or as you said, that little bit of a glimpse that you get, and that's they're usually fairies. Fairy is also an umbrella term that I'm using. There are here in the United States, I'm aware, in Native American lore, there are beings called little people, and I don't dare to even attempt to say in the Cherokee name, so I would stick to little people. And there are many similarities in describing and talking about them. So they appear, they can give gifts, they can guide children or people toward places where the berries are abundant. They punish greediness, they punish bad manners. So very much, very similar to what we find in Romanian and in Irish fairy lore about fairies. So different kind of beings that fit under this umbrella term, I would say worldwide, each of them with their lore, each of them with their characteristics and things that kind of create this common thread. So
when you say punished, I always say like, I feel like I have one earring of every earring I've ever had, right? Like I was like, I'll talk to fairies. I'll be like, give me my other earring or my other sock, right?
Yes.
Like they love shiny things.
That's funny.
Yes. And then they just reappear one day. It just reappears. Yeah.
Oh, I can tell stories about things disappearing. So this is not my personal story, it's a friend's story, who her wedding band disappeared off her finger. So she's in a place that lends itself to such things to happen. So it's a metaphysical store. She was working there back then. And all of a sudden, and it was fairly tight, the wedding band, so it's not that it could have just...
Right, it isn't just,
And they look everywhere in the store, and she looks at home, who knows, maybe nothing. And after a while, they have a little altar in store for deities that they're honoring, and some little place for fairies, making offerings, acknowledging fairies. And this wedding band was sitting like on its edge, like this, all right, on the edge of the altar. And this is like 3 months later.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
So, and they looked there before. So, I had things disappearing, car keys.
Right.
I mean, this is probably the most often encountered example, people missing car keys. And when I say missing car keys, it's not that I misplaced them, I put them somewhere and found them somewhere else, like putting them on the table, nobody in the house other than myself, come back to get them from the table and they're not there.
Yes.
And after negotiation and, I need, please come back and find them in the exact same place. So yeah, and more recently, you're talking about the earring, I had a pendant and it was on a necklace. And all of a sudden I realized that the pendant was missing. And my thought was like, well, it's the necklace. It either broke or came untied and something happened to it. Well, I found the necklace neatly folded into a pocket of a jacket and only the pendant missing.
Wow.
Now, I didn't take my pendant to throw it away and just store the necklace. And there was no way from my neck, the necklace to get into the jacket that was on the chair.
So so fairies are not bad. It's not scary. It's not like a weird thing. It's just part of nature, spirituality. And what do they offer us, and how do we negotiate like a healthy fairy relationship?
Oh, this is such an important question, and I absolutely love it. So first of all, sometimes fairies have an interest in certain humans, even if those humans may not be interested in fairy partnership.
Mm-hmm.
But for one reason or another, you might be part of their agenda.
Okay.
Like, we need this person to write stories about us and educate about us.
Mm-hmm.
Or we need this person to really take care of this place, this natural feature. Some fairies are associated with natural features stronger than others. So not everybody is a nature spirit or has strict connections, ties to natural features, but some do. And let's say that they get interested in humans doing that kind of stewardship toward land, toward the certain place. Mm-hmm. There might be knowledge that they want to pass on to people, and in so doing, those people grow respectful of fairy lore and culture, and implicitly fairy themselves. There might be offerings. Offerings mean food items, mean drink, and I'll discuss briefly about it, like in Romania, what are the traditions about it. So there are different reasons. I would say that if we look at the whole body of lore and folklore and anecdotal evidence, past and present, the relationship with fairies is pretty symbiotic. It's like a symbiosis. Mm-hmm. Now, when we think symbiosis, both parts need to contribute. So both parts can thrive. If one part doesn't do well, the other part won't do well either. Like, lichens, you have a mushroom and an algae. If the algae doesn't do the photosynthesis, then there's not enough food. If the mushroom doesn't bring the nutrients, then the algae doesn't have food. So they have to work together. So fairies have their own interests in humans. We also have our interests, because think fairy healers, think fairy doctors, fairy witches. There was a time in our history when there were no antibiotics, when there was no easy access to medical care,
right,
if at all.
Right.
So all that people had at hand was this kind of knowledge, folk knowledge, and the skill of medicine men and women and fairy doctors and witches. So these fairy doctors, they receive their knowledge from fairies. Mm-hmm. So women, men working in partnership with fairy familiars who would enter agreements. So always the relationships are quite transactional. I mean, it's not like, elf or fairy vending machine where you put a nickel and you get or a quarter and you get your bag of chips. So it's not that. But there is a degree of reciprocity. As I said, symbiosis describes it the best. So I'm doing things for you, but you also have to do things for me. Mm-hmm. I'm giving you knowledge, but I want you to spread this knowledge to these people.
Absolutely, you have to.
So it's that kind of thing. Or I want you to take care of this place and make sure that there's no destruction and no littering going on, because that's an entrance point into my world, and I don't want to go through a pile of trash when I'm moving into my world. So these kind of agreements.
Absolutely. And so fairies don't like trash, litter, like low vibes, like of any sort. If you want to invite fairies into your home, like what would you do?
So first of all, I would suggest, I would start with the basic, read the lore. If you choose to connect with fairies for whatever the reason, you may feel called, you may feel curious, understand with what are you connecting with. I would say start by connecting with the house fairies, which means fairies that are in your house. I want to make a point here. We hear nowadays a lot about I can speak, I promise. A lot about the Bountige, which translates as woman of the house. This is the Irish for woman of the house. Mm-hmm. It does not define a fairy being. There is a story, however, coming from Irish lore, that speaks about a Bantige, which is a woman, a lady of the house, who was complaining that she had a large amount of spinning to do. And she starts spinning and complaining, oh, this is so much work. At which point there is a knock at the door. The woman goes and opens the door, and there is this other lady, and she's described as smaller in size. And she walks in and begins spinning, and she spins very fast. And there's another knock at the door, and another similar being, until the Bantige woman of the house, so the human lady, realizes that there are fairies coming into her house. And they were coming from a fairy mound that she could see not far from her own household. And the situation gets out of hand. It is getting alarming because there is a lot of fairy ladies spinning and chattering, and it's like utter chaos, talking very loud, it's like utter chaos. And she really doesn't know what to do. She's probably telling herself that she will never again in her life will complain about any amount of work just to see the fairy group out. So she comes up with this thing, gets to the door, and then she starts screaming, oh, the mound in front of me is on fire. And the fairy, the women, alarmed, all get out, run toward the mound, and the human lady closes the door behind them. So basically tricks them out. So that is one story where the expression Bantige appears, but it refers clearly, Bantige refers to the human protagonist in the story, not to the fairy character. Now, from this, I think it's 1980 something, 97, if not much mistaken, there is a book, won't make any names. The book comes out and begins to talk about the Bantige as the house fairy, to whom one should offer, I believe, raspberries and cream.
Okay.
I don't think any fairy being would complain about raspberries and cream, but to come and say that this is an Irish traditional thing, that's not correct. It may happen that the fairies in your house to tell you, hey, leave for me out some raspberries and cream. I believe it's entirely possible. I actually left raspberries and cream for mine to see how they react. They enjoyed it. But this is not something that I would label, this is an authentic Irish tradition. This is a modern creation. Fine with modern creations, just let's present them for what they are, modern creation, instead of trying to pass them as old lore. There is a place for both.
I like that. And that's very common right now.
Yeah.
And
This only happens to me.
Right.
I'm the only source. Nobody, I'm the only one that maybe other people have been through this as well. It's not lore. It kind of is compared to the lore, but it doesn't quite match. Nonetheless, it's my personal experience and it's equally valid. But I'm not trying to describe it, oh, I learned this from an old manuscript that was lost.
No.
Because the cat ate it or the dog messed up with it. So, not in that way. And to go back to the house fairies and making connections, starting partnerships. There are probably every culture that I can think of has some form of house fairy or house spirit, fairy-like spirit around. They're known as kobolds in Germany and in Germanic-speaking pockets of population that we have in Romania. Tomte in Scandinavian. Here in the United States and in the Anglosphere, we have hobs. So hob is a very generic name. I didn't find any specific name that applies, in the United States. So I'll go with hobs generally. Brownies in the English, in England and Anglosphere. So these are beings that, like obviously being around the house, and occasionally they will participate into household work and helping people, different tasks, bringing luck to the house, to the habitation, where which is also theirs. and it is customary to leave offerings for them. I know examples from Irish and some Scottish material where porridge with a big pat of butter on top is to be left out for the house fairies by the fireplace. In Romania, I'm not aware of leaving specifically offerings for the house fairies in the same manner, like just put a dish or something out. But there were like more like meals, complete meals, like picnic style, offered for them. So I remember on different occasions, people will go out, especially in the countryside, will go out and nearby crossroads and certain bodies of water, or nearby certain trees who are known for fairy presence or fairy association, they would lie a white tablecloth, and usually that's white colored foods like dairy or hard-boiled eggs or chicken, roast chicken. So milk, fresh water, and while having picnics, so this was done on May Day on various occasions or holidays around the year. While people would partake in this, a plate would be made for fairies. And that plate, the content of that plate would be left even after the humans would clean their picnic ware and leave. If a stranger would pass by, the custom was to invite them to share food with you. Because that could have been a fairy. And just think hundreds of years ago, when people seldom traveled any farther than the next village. And villages were rather small communities where everybody knew everybody. So to have a stranger, someone whom you could not identify, just walking by, that really increases the likelihood, puts out there the possibility that, hey, you actually may be having a fairy visiting, so show hospitality, show good manners, because this will put you in, good terms and their good graces, which applies for, I believe, humans, not only fairies. Be nice, be kind. Yeah, knock at the door before just entering, ask for permission, invite rather than act with entitlement, and chances are you open the door to partnerships.
To partnerships with the fairy realm.
With the fairy realm, yeah.
So that includes elves, fairies.
Yes.
What else?
Depending in what culture do you go. So if you go into in Ireland, that's going to be the she. If you go into Scotland, that's also going to be the she. Also, it's spelled differently. In Romania, we have like two major groups. One of them is called the Sânziene, and they're like more fond of humans. I could say they show up at various holidays. They bless herbs for healing. And the other group that we have in Romania is called Yele or Rusali. And Yele is actually a way of like calling them in third person. So you wouldn't say the name. So you wouldn't actually invite their presence by just saying the name. Which makes me circle to elves, Alfar, in Germanic and Norse cultures, where the term, so basically the term elf was far more spread, was the dominant expression for this type of otherworldly beings. And the word fairy came in from France. 1066, the Battle of Hastings, William the Conqueror comes into England, and then French culture flows into England, including a different vocabulary for the spiritual, for the mystic, fairies, elves included. So this is why we have fairies. And notice that there's a large variety, and sometimes terms are used interchangeably. To fairies, so in Ireland, they don't refer, people prefer not to refer directly as she. They call them by euphemism, the good people, the gentry, the good, the fair folk. Fair meaning like fair in their action, like righteous, kind. So notice the parallel with the Romanian, where it's like, oh, yele, they don't really call them directly. So the word fairy came in to be used, so you don't call elf directly. And now it looks like we to find euphemism to replace fairy, because that's no longer. So it's a constantly change in the landscape, etymology and what expressions.
Let's go around with you leaving an offering it. People are like, I'm not going to leave a plate of food. Who's going to eat it? How long do I leave there? Is it going to get moldy? Now, what would you say? Like, if you're like, okay, I'll leave some food out for the spirit realm. Are they actually? Will you go back and they haven't physically eaten the food? So how are they benefiting from this?
Okay, so that's a longer explanation. Like everything related to fairy has a degree of length to it. First of all, fairies, they're said to come and partake from the essence, from the vital principle, the energy that is in the food. Now, occasionally, you will find actually bits of food missing from what you put out there. And I'm not talking about outside where the cat will put off, or the raccoons may come and get it, which they oftentimes do. But I'm talking about offerings being left inside. So inside, I leave things for my house fairies. And sometimes physically, it's rare, but it happens when part of the drink or the food that I left goes missing. Once it's been there for like 24 hours, the rest of it goes into compost, because the essence, the vital essence of it has been taken. When I leave offerings outside, like I mentioned before, there was the custom, you don't have to leave the plate. First of all, it might be silverware that you don't really want to leave outside. There was customary to, and I'm talking like Irish lore, where sometimes offerings were put inside mounds. There were openings, and they would pour offerings inside the mounds, or have the offerings outside for, I don't know, you can engage in a dialogue, you can, if you are holding any kind of ritual, you can have like ritual, and at the end, you can bury those foods. Again, with the idea that somehow that essence is going to transfer, is going to reach the otherworldly beings, the fairy beings. My favorite is to leave it outside. I have a stone, actually, there's a flat stone by a certain tree in my backyard. And this is where I leave, and it could be a sandwich. It could be, or something smaller. It doesn't have to be like a full meal that you're leaving out there. It could be like half slice of bread and butter. And it's usually left on the stone, and if it's anything liquid, I like to pour it around. So I keep it out for a while, do a little meditation, have a conversation, and then pour my offerings or leave them there. If in, I don't know, 12 hours, the food is still there, I will bury it, or I will take it to the compost. So
I love that you say compost. I do think the spirit realm is like, I'm a big advocate for compost. I'm always going outside to feed we take the leftovers, we go outside, we feed the critters, we know, because you feed the earth is going to feed you.
Absolutely.
Right?
Oh, yeah. I read it somewhere. I don't remember exactly where, but I really like the way it was described when making offerings. Kind of from us to the earth, to the gods, and then it's from the gods to the earth, to us. So it's like this 2 ways, constant exchange. whether it's gods or fairies that would take care and protect and support your abundance and well-being in different ways. That's kind of the same.
So if our listeners are they're on a spiritual path and they incorporate all sorts of things, you're like, oh yeah, I was raised in the Christian tradition, but also I'm intuitive, but now I'm exploring everything. Like, how would you say to like incorporate the fairy path into their spiritual journey?
Oh, there's no conflict in between a fairy spiritual path and any other spiritual path. Reverend Robert Kirk in the 17th century in Scotland, he tried to reconcile. He's a pastor, Presbyterian pastor. So he tried to reconciliate fairy beliefs that obvious things happen. You cannot ignore them, you cannot deny them. And you have two possibilities. Either demonize them and say that they're all bad, and then we all live in constant fear and panic that it's someone bad, around. Or you can integrate. And in trying to integrate the two bodies of belief, pre-Christian, because fairies have pre-Christian history as well, with the dominant religion, all kind of stories about fairies coming around have been created. And Kirk describes them as a halfway between human nature and angelic nature.
Absolutely.
So you have this halfway.
I love that.
And make of it whatever you will. You like angels, you might as well like working with fairies, focusing on the good rather than being quick at demonizing. And fairy, you can have a fairy-based path without actually conflicting in any way with your other religious beliefs, whatever your religious beliefs are.
Right. I love that. That's because it's nature, it's fairies.
In Romania, they do, so the beliefs in fairies were so strong. And you're talking on a society that had been agricultural for millennia. So you know that there is power in these fairies who at certain times around the year will come and bless your crops in the fields. And if they're not happy with what you do as a community, they will send hail and thunderstorms and destructive winds. That was in the purview of fairies, so they could do this. So holidays held in their honor, they are incorporated into the Christian calendar of holidays. So you have the holiday of Sânziene with fairies, which is midsummer. Yes, Saint John the Baptist is acknowledged at midsummer, but the holiday in Romania doesn't bear his name, bear the name of the fairies.
Yes, and there's also, I know in Ireland and some parts of the United States, farmers will actually, if there's a area and they think that's a fairy house, even in modern society, that farmer will be like, I'm not touching the fairy house. We're leaving that.
Yeah, it's best not to touch it. I mean, it sometimes happens that yes, you go and you intervene with it and nothing happens. Or maybe not directly, maybe not immediately enough to make a connection, to make a correlation, but you don't know, 6 months down the road or a year down the road, what the consequences might be. So I would mess up with any fairy place, and I would suggest respect to fairy places.
And when you're, I know when I'm hiking sometimes, I'll see like, oh, I think that's a fairy house.
Yes.
And I just acknowledge the fairies and move on, right? That's the importance of not being on a trail. In modern day, we hike a lot, and we have these like, we don't litter, we don't be loud. I don't want to trash in my yard. So from a fairy perspective, might be the same. I mean, get your napkins or your candy wrappers off my property. Off my property. Right.
I really like that you mentioned, this might be a fairy house in Iceland. They have the culture, the Huldufólk, which is the hidden people. And there are fairy seers, and they can see these boulders, really large rocks, and they can identify, they can see, oh my gosh, that's a fairy house. Do not touch it.
Right.
And they can tell how, and again, here we have conflicts regarding dimensions because fairies are, or elves, sorry, talking Iceland, they call them elves over there. They're tall, you see a boulder, how comes that whole family fits into that boulder? This could be a completely separate discussion. We're talking here about liminal spaces, to put it very briefly, liminal spaces, and things that appear to have a very finite and well-defined physical structure in our world. One step away into another dimension can be something else.
Absolutely, I love that. Another dimension, that's a whole other show.
Yeah,
this
is other worlds. So
yes.
There is a book coming out, Morgan Diamond wrote it. I wrote the preface for it, by the way. Fairy, Other World by many other names.
Right.
The Other World by many other names. And that's a whole exploration about this liminality and this, going back and forth. And yes, it's there, although we cannot see it. This may appear as something on our side, but to other people who have the ability to see, they can tell that that's a portal, that's something different in another dimension.
So where can we find more about you, more about your work, your book, your art?
I'm on Facebook and Simina Yoga on Facebook. Daniela Simina author page on Facebook. That's all my events, all reviews, books, conferences. I present a lot at conferences, and on my author page there are always updates. And I do have a blog, Whispers in the Twilight, on Blogspot.
Great.
And that's where I post regularly.
Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom today. And thank you for listening to another woman share her stories of inspiration. Find us at HYDF.online, Harnessing Your Divine Feminine, where we give women opportunities. Thank you. Bye-bye.
The Harnessing Your Divine Feminine show is produced by 8 Robinsons TV. Subscribe for only $30 per year for access to exclusive and archived content. Visit www.the8ROBINSONS.tv. Thank you for watching.